What kind of woman leaves two little girls alone on a road that has no end? The question hangs in the air like the cold Dakota wind, dragging its shadow over the narrow trail where Emily and Hannah Walker stand. Their hands clasped so tight, their knuckles pale. They are 6 years old, thin as reeds, their dresses dusty, their hair tangled by the long ride that ended with a lie. Margaret Hayes had smiled when she set them down, said she would be right back, her voice smooth, her eyes dull and hard, then turned the wagon and drove away without looking behind her. The sound of the wheels faded. Silence took its place, and the prairie, endless and indifferent, looked on. Emily feels it first. The truth. It lands in her chest like a stone, heavy and cold. She doesn't cry. She holds Hannah closer instead, pressing the worn rag doll, also called Margaret, between them like a small, useless shield. Hannah still searches the horizon, waiting for the woman who will never return, whispering little hopes to the wind, asking if maybe they misunderstood. But Emily knows. Their mother died 2 years earlier. Their father followed her into the ground not long ago, and Margaret Hayes never wanted them. They are not hers, they never were. The day stretches. Hunger, thirst, fear. These things come in waves. Shadows lengthen. Coyotes call from far away. Hannah finally stops looking down the road and simply leans against her sister, as if Emily alone is solid enough to keep the world from falling apart. And maybe she is. Emily begins to think about where to walk, which direction might lead to water, to people, to anything that is not this terrible emptiness. Then, faintly at first, hooves, a horse, a rider. He appears out of the horizon like a question that might also be an answer. Samuel Reed. A man past the midpoint of his life, weathered by sun and grief, riding alone as he has done most days since his wife Sarah died 2 years earlier. His eyes, steady and cautious, take in the scene before he speaks. 2 girls, no wagon, no adults, no sense in it at all. He dismounts slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. No sudden moves, no loud voice. "You girls thirsty?" he asks, gentle, matter of fact. He offers water, not promises. Bread, not questions. He does not rush them, does not crowd them, does not assume a right to their story. It is this restraint, this quiet respect, that cracks the shell around Emily's fear. She watches him carefully. Hannah drinks first, trusting because she must. Emily drinks because she cannot afford not to. The sun lowers, the air cools, and Samuel makes the simplest offer a man can make. "I've got a ranch not far from here. You can rest, just for the night. No one will bother you." He says it like the truth. Not soft, not sweet, just steady. Emily thinks. She weighs danger against certainty. The certainty is that if they stay, the prairie will take them. So she nods. A small nod, the kind that changes everything. He lifts them both onto his horse, making sure they sit secure, and leads the animal forward, walking beside it so they won't feel trapped. The miles pass in silence, broken only by the wind, and Hannah's quiet breathing against Emily's shoulder. Samuel doesn't ask their story. Not yet. He knows enough of pain to understand that sometimes people need a roof before they can speak. Cedar Ridge Ranch rises out of the dusk like a promise that life can still be organized, fenced, held together. Barns, corrals, the main house with its lamplight glowing through curtained windows. The air smells of hay and wood smoke. For the first time in weeks, the girls feel the outline of safety. Inside, Samuel makes them simple food. Warm, plain, real. He shows them a small room, a bed with clean sheets, a quilt folded at the foot. "You can sleep here," he says. "Door stays open if you want." He leaves them space. He leaves them dignity. It is more mercy than either child expected from the world again. Later, when the lamp is low and the ranch falls quiet, Samuel sits alone at his table, staring at nothing. He thinks of Sarah, of the children they never had, of the empty rooms in his house and the emptier places in his chest. He did not plan for this. But sometimes the frontier decides your story for you. He feels the shape of a decision forming, slow and careful, like clouds rolling in over the plains. In the dark bedroom, Emily finally allows a tear to escape. Just one, sliding down into the pillow. Hannah whispers that maybe this is temporary. Maybe their stepmother will still return. Emily doesn't answer. She only holds her sister tighter, listens to the house breathing around them, and wonders what happens next. Morning comes with the sounds of a working ranch. Boots on boards, cattle calling, men talking low. Samuel introduces the girls with the same calm tone he uses for everything, and the men nod, accept, move on. Work does not pause for tragedy out here. The world keeps turning. Emily watches him. Watches how he doesn't force smiles or cheap comfort. How he keeps a respectful distance, yet somehow makes the space safe. Hannah follows a kitten into the kitchen and laughs for the first time since the road. It is a small laugh, fragile, precious, and the question returns, heavier now, but different. Not, who leaves children like this, but who chooses to stay? Samuel Reed looks at the two girls eating breakfast at his table, trying to be quiet, trying not to take up too much room. He sees the way Emily scans every doorway, every exit. He sees the way Hannah clings to the doll like a lifeline. He feels a pull inside him, pain meeting purpose, grief meeting grace. He does not announce anything. He simply starts to act as if their lives matter to him. Because they do. And so the first fragile thread of family is tied. Not by blood, not by law, but by the simple, stubborn refusal to look away. Out on the Dakota plains, under a sky wide enough to hold all their fears and all their hopes, a new story begins. The mornings at Cedar Ridge arrive before the sun fully admits it, with a gray light that washes over the corrals and the long sweep of pasture. Emily wakes first, always. Habit. She listens, still mapping escape routes, still measuring safety by sound. The house creaks, the stove clicks. Samuel moves through his quiet routines, and she realizes the world is not falling apart, at least not today. Hannah wakes slower, warm and soft under the quilt, the doll pressed to her chest. They move together toward the kitchen, careful not to take up more space than they deserve. Though no one has ever told them they must shrink. It is something loss teaches you on its own. Samuel doesn't speak much over breakfast. He doesn't need to. The ranch fills every silence with purpose. After they eat, he shows them simple things. Nothing dangerous, nothing too heavy. How to brush the dust from the horses. How to carry water without spilling. How to fold blankets and stack wood. He thanks them when they try, even when the job is small or imperfect. It is the first time in a long while anyone has suggested their efforts matter. The men on the ranch take their cue from Samuel. Brief nods, a kind of respectful distance. No staring, no pity, just space to exist. Gradually, the tightness around Emily's chest loosens. She still watches everything. She still counts the doors. But the counting becomes less desperate. She learns the rhythm here. Work, meal, work, dusk. She begins to expect food at the end of each day, and rest at the end of that. Her shoulders sink a little lower. Hannah flourishes faster. Animals trust her, they always have. A trembling calf that won't take a bottle will nose at her hand. The kitten that scratches everyone else curls into her lap and sleeps. Samuel notices, though he says very little. Only makes sure that the times Hannah spends in the barn are supervised, useful, and safe. On the third Sunday, he tells them they'll be riding into Willow Creek. You'll need clothes that fit, he says simply. He doesn't add any grand speech about kindness or expectations. He just harnesses the team and waits while they climb into the wagon. The town is small but busy, the kind of place where every arrival is an event. Heads turn. Conversation dips. Emily feels the eyes before she sees them. The weight of judgment and curiosity. She straightens her back, gripping her sister's hand until Hannah's fingers almost ache. Samuel doesn't shrink, doesn't rush them. He walks them into the mercantile, speaks to the owner with the same even tone he uses at home. Dresses, boots, coats. He does not barter down to the last cent. He does not make a show of charity. He simply pays. He lets the girls choose fabrics they like. Nothing gaudy, nothing cheap, just sturdy and warm. When Hannah spins once in a new blue dress, the smallest smile tugs at the corner of his mouth before he tucks it away again, private. Some townsfolk soften at that. Others whisper into their collars and pretend they are not whispering at all. Emily hears bits of it. She files the words away, but she also hears something else. The Reed girls, spoken by the mercantile owner to his wife, casually, like a settled fact. The phrase burns straight through her, frightening and miraculous all at once. The weeks fall into place. The girls help with cooking, with gathering eggs, with cleaning tools and sweeping floors. Samuel insists that they rest too, that they read, that they learn. He brings home old books from the town, worn at the edges but still full of worlds. Emily attacks them like a starving person at a table. She reads aloud to Hannah, stumbling over long words, then smoothing them into sense. They practice writing at the table after supper, the fire snapping softly, Samuel reading reports and ledgers across from them, the lamplight turning the room into a small island of safety in a dark and unkind world. Sometimes, at night, Hannah cries. Not loudly, not for long, but honestly. Emily holds her while she does, and eventually the tears run out. On those nights, Samuel sits longer than usual at the table, staring into the fire, as if it is the only thing patient enough to hear the silent parts of a man's grief. He does not intrude. He is there. That is enough. On one long afternoon, a storm sweeps the plains without warning. Wind screams across the yard, slamming shutters, ripping a gate loose. Samuel moves like someone who has lived his life by weather, getting the stock secured, the tack in, the men off the exposed ridges. Emily, wild with fear that he won't come back, positions herself near the door, listening for hooves, counting every crash of thunder like a clock. When he finally returns soaked and safe, shaking the rain from his hat, she releases a breath she didn't realize she was holding. He meets her eyes for a moment, reading a language made of worry and relief. Neither of them comments on it. They don't have to. Slowly, the girl's presence becomes part of the ranch's structure. One of the hands teaches Emily how to tie a proper knot. Another carves a small wooden horse for Hannah, pretending he just had the spare wood lying around. No one uses words like destiny or salvation. People here don't talk that way, but a current of gentleness runs beneath the labor, stitching the girls into the fabric of daily life. Their first real outing beyond the mercantile happens when Samuel takes them to the church social, not for religion so much as for community. The town's women study the girls, measuring them, deciding. Some open their arms, some fold them tightly. A few stand apart, watching Samuel like a problem yet unsolved. He feels it, but he refuses to blink first. He brings the girls food, sits with them, listens to their soft conversation as if it is the only sound worth hearing. That quiet loyalty, repeated over time, begins to speak louder than gossip ever could. At Cedar Ridge, the seasons turn. The grass browns, then whitens with frost, then brightens again. The girls grow stronger, less haunted. Emily's quick mind becomes a tool instead of merely a shield. Hannah's sweetness turns from fragility into a steady light. Samuel does not rush what is happening or give it a name. But the truth is simple. 3 broken lives are learning to beat in the same rhythm. Some nights, long after the girls have gone to bed, Samuel stands outside beneath the enormous western sky. He thinks of the road where he found them. He thinks of Sarah, of the children they never had. He thinks of the long quiet of his house before 2 small voices filled it. There is no grand revelation, no music in the background, no words spoken to the wind. Just a man, unsteady and grateful, accepting the weight of 2 small souls and finding that somehow it makes him stronger. And in their shared stillness, the ranch becomes not only a place to live, but a place to be remade. By late autumn, the rhythm at Cedar Ridge feels almost like certainty, but certainty on the frontier is always borrowed time. Samuel knows it. He watches the girls at the table one evening. Hannah bent over a sketch of a horse, Emily tracing letters along the page with a seriousness that would be comical if it weren't so fragile. He understands that kindness alone will not hold them. Paper must do what the heart has already chosen, and so one morning, with the same calm voice he uses for everything that matters, he tells them he intends to make them his daughters in the eyes of the law. Hannah's breath catches like a moth in a jar. Emily freezes, pencil poised, wary hope rising too fast for her to control. Samuel does not promise a world he can't command. He simply says, "No one will take you from here if I can help it." Eleanor Parker, the territory's child welfare officer, arrives a week later in a modest buggy, bringing with her a stack of forms and a clear gaze that misses little. She has seen too much neglect to be moved by sentiment alone. She walks the ranch, talks to the hands, sits at the table with Samuel and the girls, listening to the quiet cadence of their life. When she sees Hannah fall asleep against Samuel's shoulder as naturally as if she had been born to it, she nods once, almost to herself. "The paperwork will move," she says, "and so will the whispers. Be ready for both." The whispers have already begun in Willow Creek. They curl out of the church doors and around the mercantile like smoke from a brush fire. Some speak gently of a widower's generosity. Others wonder what draws a single man to two small girls. Nobody says it to his face. The frontier has rules about that, but Samuel hears enough to understand why Eleanor quietly advises him that a respectable female presence in the house will calm the talk. He does not argue. He has seen the sideways looks, the careful distance. He knows this fight will be won not in speeches but in choices. Grace Thompson arrives before the first snow. Mid-40s, self-contained. A widow with a backbone like hickory and hands that know the language of work. She does not smother the girls with sweetness. She folds them in with structure instead. Beds are made tight. Aprons are tied. Manners are polished, not as decoration but as armor. And yet there are nights when she sits on the edge of Hannah's bed, humming an old hymn so softly it sounds like memory. The town notes her presence, and the volume of the whispers drops, not gone, merely muted. School begins for the girls under Miss Laura Bennett, a teacher whose calm is sharper than most men's tempers. She introduces them without fuss, then closes the day's lesson like a door. But children carry their parents' words like lanterns, and some lanterns burn ugly. Emily hears orphans spoken as if it were a stain. Hannah endures curious stares like needles. When a boy asks too loudly whether Samuel is really their pa or just keeping them, Emily's eyes harden in a way that should never belong to a child. Laura cuts through the room with a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Here," she says, "we speak what is true and what is kind, or we don't speak." The rule holds, mostly, yet the town still weighs them. At church socials, women smile thinly and ask questions that sound like kindness but feel like measurement. Men salute Samuel with respect, but a notch of distance remains. Samuel answers all of it the same way he answers the land, by tending to what is his and outlasting the weather. He brings the girls to town as he always has. He looks nobody in the eye and everybody in the eye at once. Slowly, the story begins to rewrite itself. Not that widower with the foundlings, but the Reed girls. A language of belonging takes root. Meanwhile, the formalities of adoption wind through the courthouse like a slow river. Eleanor visits again, checking the small details that prove a life is steady. Records, rooms, routines. She asks Emily what she wants. The girl's answer is simple and unsentimental. "I want to stay where people mean what they say." Hannah just says, "Home," and leans into Samuel's side as if she has always known where that is. Eleanor tucks both responses into her report like precious coins. The day they stand before the judge is cold enough that breath looks like ghosts. The courtroom is plain, the law stripped of all ceremony except its own gravity. The judge reads their names, asks questions carefully, and listens to the answers like a man stacking stones in a river, testing for strength. Samuel speaks little, but when he does, his voice does not shake. I will raise them as my own, he says, and I will protect them. Grace and Eleanor give their testimony. Laura Bennett submits a letter about the girls' progress. Even a few ranch hands appear, hats in hands, looking uncomfortable in suits that don't fit, saying with blunt sincerity that the girls are safe, and that should be enough for any decent man. When the judge signs the order, the world does not burst into light. No music swells. The pen simply scratches across paper, quiet as snowfall. But the law has done its work. It has put a frame around what love has already drawn. Emily breathes out like someone who has been underwater too long. Hannah presses her face into Samuel's coat, a small sob slipping free before she can catch it. Samuel lowers a hand to their shoulders, firm and steady, and feels something inside him click into place that he did not know was loose. Back in Willow Creek, gossip must find a new target. People grow tired of outrage the way they grow tired of weather. Grace's presence steadies the last of the doubters. Laura keeps the schoolroom safe. Eleanor files the papers and, with a rare smile, tells Samuel that the girls now have a future no one can threaten without going through him first. And Samuel, who never sought to be anyone's hero, does what he has always done. He goes back to work, knowing that the real battle will always be the daily one. To be constant, to be kind, to be there. At night, the three of them sit by the fire, the girls writing their names again and again on scraps of paper, marveling at how the letters now belong to them entirely. Emily writes Emily Reed, testing the shape of it like a stone in her palm. Hannah writes the same and dots the I with a little heart when she thinks no one is looking. Samuel pretends he doesn't see. Grace pretends she doesn't smile. Outside, the wind combs the prairie. Inside, a fragile permanence settles. Not loud, not showy, but solid as a post, set deep in clean earth. The frontier still watches. The future still waits. But for now, Cedar Ridge has crossed a line from chance into choice, from accident into family, and there is no going back. Winter settles over Cedar Ridge like a truth that cannot be softened. Snow lays itself across the pastures, fences fade into white, and the sky feels closer, heavier, as if watching. Inside the house, the fire keeps back the worst of the cold, and life narrows to the circle of light around the hearth. Emily and Hannah read, practice handwriting, help Grace with stews and bread. Samuel moves through the days with the same steady gravity as always, but something new threads the quiet. An ease that comes when danger feels distant. They begin to believe in permanence. That is when the past finds them. She arrives without warning. A wagon in the yard. A knock on the door like a verdict. Grace answers first, instinctively stepping sideways to block the view of the girls. Margaret Hayes stands in the doorway wrapped in a coat that has seen better days, her mouth tight, her eyes sharp and restless. She smells of distance and desperation. When Samuel comes from the back room, she looks him over like he is land to be claimed. I've come for the girls, she says, but there is no maternal warmth in it. Only calculation. Samuel doesn't raise his voice. He never needs to. You left them on a road, he replies. They're mine now, by law. Margaret smiles thinly. Law can be moved, she says, or stopped, especially if a man like you wants to keep his reputation neat. The meaning is not even disguised. She wants money, silence for a price, freedom for a price, the girls, her leverage. Grace keeps Emily and Hannah in the kitchen, but sound moves through walls like smoke. Emily knows that voice, knows the particular hollowness of it. Hannah trembles, though she cannot name why. Samuel steps onto the porch with Margaret, where the wind cuts words into hard edges. She speaks of courts, of rumors, of how easy it would be to cast doubt on any man living alone with children. Frontier justice is not always just, and both of them know it. He says very little, but every syllable feels carved from stone. In the end, the exchange is as brutal as any gunfight, only quieter. $1,000. Nearly ruinous. The kind of money that could buy land, cattle, a future. He pays it anyway, Because some threats do not dissolve with pride or courage. They dissolve with sacrifice. He insists on papers, signed, sealed, final, terminating whatever tenuous rights Margaret might still claim. She agrees, eager for coin, eager to leave. When the ink dries, she tucks the bills away and steps into the wagon without a backward glance. The girls do not see her go. Samuel makes sure of that. That night he sits by the fire long after the others sleep, elbows on his knees, head bowed. Not in defeat, but in the quiet ache of a man who has done what needed doing and will pay the price silently. Grace finds him there once, places a hand on his shoulder, then leaves without a word. Respect is often best expressed by absence. In the days that follow, the town hums with rumor. Some admire him. Some count his money and call him a fool, but none of it touches the girls. To them, the world simply feels safer, as if the walls of the house have moved closer and braced themselves. Christmas creeps toward them with the slow insistence of the season. Cedar Ridge is not a place for extravagance, but it is a place for meaning. Grace bakes what she can with what they have. The men cut a small pine and drag it into the parlor, laughing like boys when the branches shake snow across the floor. Emily and Hannah decorate with bits of ribbon, paper chains, and the smallest touches of color. Samuel watches from the threshold, learning in silence how joy sounds in a house that has known too much echo. On Christmas Eve, the snow glows blue under the moon. The girls sit at Samuel's feet while he reads them a worn Bible passage, his voice low and steady, more storyteller than preacher. Afterward, he disappears upstairs for a moment and returns with a small wooden box wrapped in a faded cloth. His hands linger on it, like he is asking permission from a memory. "These belong to Sarah's family," he says. "They're not worth much to anyone but us, but I'd like you to have them." Inside are 2 simple gold rings, the metal soft with age, the engraving worn smooth. Grace inhales sharply. Emily stares as if the world has tilted. Hannah's hand flies to her mouth. Samuel clears his throat, and for once his calm cracks just a little. "I don't have the words," he says, "but you are mine, and this is our house, our family, if you want it to be." Emily reaches out first, fingers trembling. She understands what this means in a way that goes beyond law or money. It is inheritance, choice, a place in a lineage that grief once cut short. Hannah leans against Samuel, tears slipping soundlessly down her cheeks, and he holds them both like something precious and breakable. Grace turns away long enough to swipe at her own eyes, then comes back and fastens each ring on a chain so the girls can wear them safely around their necks. The next morning, Christmas dawns with the smell of cinnamon and wood smoke. There are small gifts, books for Emily, a carved horse for Hannah, wool gloves for both. Nothing lavish, everything chosen with care. The ranch hands bring awkwardly wrapped packages and stay for coffee and pie, trying and failing not to look moved by the sight of the little family gathered close. Laughter lives in the room like a guest who, for once, has been invited. And beneath the celebration runs a deeper current, relief. The threat that once circled them has been paid off and sent away. The law, the rings, the steady presence of Grace, the unwavering watchfulness of Samuel, all of it weaves together into something the girls have never truly known. Safety that doesn't feel temporary. At night, when the house falls to quiet again, Emily traces the shape of the ring through her nightdress and whispers to Hannah that they are staying. Hannah smiles into the pillow, not needing to answer. She already knew. Outside, the prairie lies under snow, vast and silent. Inside, 3 lives and 1 housekeeper sit at the same table, bound not by perfection, but by choice. The world beyond their fences still holds shadows and judgments and the sharp edges of survival. But here, in this small circle of warmth, family has taken root. And like all things that truly live on the western plains, it has learned to hold fast against the wind. Spring returns to Cedar Ridge not with fanfare, but with the quiet persistence of grass finding its way through thawing earth. The girls grow taller, steadier, the rings at their throats warming with the heat of their skin. Samuel feels the house change with them, less hollow, less haunted. And just when life begins to feel almost ordinary, Eleanor Parker arrives once more, not with papers this time, but with a question that carries its own gravity. There is a boy, she explains. Jacob Miller, a child frayed around the edges by too many nights alone, living half wild along a creek bed until a rancher found him and sent word. He does not speak much. He does not trust easily. He needs a place that will not tire of him when the silence grows long. Eleanor's eyes rest on Samuel, on Emily and Hannah, on Grace quietly kneading dough at the table. Not a favor, she says, a calling, only if it is yours. Samuel does not answer at once. He never does. He moves through the ranch for a day with the question in his pocket, weighing it as carefully as he would a sick calf or a coming storm. It is Emily who breaks the silence that night. Someone did this for us, she says simply. Hannah nods, solemn as a prayer. Grace studies Samuel with that level, steady gaze that sees beneath a man's words. Home isn't smaller when you share it, she says. It just gets busier. He smiles, rare and fleeting, and the decision is made. Jacob arrives on a gray afternoon, thin as a fence rail, eyes old in a boy's face. He stands by the wagon with his hat crushed in his hands, ready to bolt at the first wrong move. Samuel doesn't crowd him. He offers the same thing he once offered two frightened girls, a meal, a bed, and time. Grace gives him clean clothes with a brisk kindness that asks nothing in return. Emily and Hannah take turns sitting near him without asking questions, leaving space for trust to grow on its own. Days pass. Jacob learns the language of the ranch quietly. Feed here, carry that, close the gate behind you. He begins to sleep through the night. He begins to eat seconds. And one evening, as the sun bleeds orange across the horizon, he lifts his head during supper and asks Samuel if he may call him Sir. The word is small, but the world turns slightly when he says it. The town notices, of course. Willow Creek always does. But the pattern is familiar now. Curiosity, skepticism, then grudging respect as Cedar Ridge continues to stand solid. Laura Bennett sees Jacob in school, seated beside Hannah, copying letters as if they might slip away if he doesn't hold them tight enough. Eleanor visits from time to time, not to inspect, but to witness. She watches Emily read, listens to Hannah talk about animals with the soft authority of someone who understands their hearts, and sees Jacob begin to laugh like a boy who has remembered something he thought was gone. She leaves with a lighter step. Years do what years always do. They pass. The ranch weathers droughts, storms, lean seasons, and small triumphs. Other children come through its doors, some for a season, some forever. Each brings their own shadows, their own fragile hopes. And each one finds the same thing, a place where work is steady, words matter, and love is something you do more than something you say. Grace becomes the quiet axis of the household, her presence a kind of moral gravity. Samuel grows older, his hair silvering, his shoulders still squared against the wind. He watches the children he once carried across icy yards now carry the ranch with a competence born of necessity and care. Emily blooms into a woman with a mind as sharp as prairie light. She studies, then teaches, then writes, capturing the story of people who chose one another in a place that would have let them disappear. Hannah becomes what she was always meant to be, a healer of animals, fearless with a foal or a half-broken stallion, crossing long miles to help creatures that cannot ask for themselves. Jacob grows into a man of few words and unshakable loyalty, the ranch's steady right hand, carrying Samuel's lessons in the set of his shoulders and the fairness of his choices. And through it all, Cedar Ridge remains. The house, the barn, the slope of land down toward the creek. These become more than geography. They become a testimony. Strangers arrive and leave changed. Children who expected nothing learn to expect breakfast and warmth, and someone waiting up if they're late. On certain winter nights, When the fire burns low and the wind sings against the eaves, Samuel sits surrounded by the grown and growing lives that once fit beneath his arms. He feels Sarah there too, not as a ghost, but as a blessing braided into the life he built from heartbreak. There are no perfect endings on the frontier. There are only days lived honestly and fiercely, bound by duty and softened by love. But there are moments that feel close, like watching Hannah ride home at dusk, saddle creaking, hair loose in the wind. Like seeing Emily read aloud to a new child, the way she once read to her sister. Like walking the fence line with Jacob and realizing that, somewhere along the way, he began to walk beside him instead of behind. The land remembers footsteps, the house remembers laughter, and the people of Willow Creek, who once watched with suspicion, now speak of Cedar Ridge with a quiet reverence. A place where no one is left on the road. A place where family is something built, plank by plank, promise by promise. One evening, as the sky stains violet and the first stars appear, Samuel stands on the porch with Grace. The children, no, the adults they have become, move through the house behind them, their lives overlapping like music. "We didn't plan any of this," he says. Grace smiles. "No," she answers. "But we chose it. And we kept choosing it." The wind carries their words away across the prairie, but the truth remains. Anchored deep in the soil, love, once rooted, can outlast anything. The years pass gently now, and the story eases toward stillness. Emily writes, her words traveling farther than the fences that once hemmed her life. Hannah rides under wide skies, a healer wherever she goes, but always finds her way back to the long porch and the familiar creak of Cedar Ridge. Jacob holds the ranch like a promise kept, working from dawn to dusk with a quiet pride. Samuel, older and softer around the edges, watches all this from his chair by the fire, grateful for every voice, every footstep, every small proof that he did not walk away the day fate asked him to stay. And you can imagine the house at night, warm and quiet, the rings glinting faintly in the lamplight. The children, no longer children, gathered close. The story does not end. It settles. It breathes. And in that gentle silence, a whisper remains. That family is a choice you make again and again, until it becomes the truest thing you know. End of article. Good night.